I've never been more excited to click record than I am right now. I've had a lot of my childhood heroes on this program, but tonight, not only do we have a WWE Hall of Famer, an Intercontinental Champion, but my favorite wrestler of all time, the one and only Tito Santana. Tito, thank you so much for taking some time out.
You're welcome, Mike. It's been nice knowing you for quite a while already.
I want to tell a quick story. When I was wrestling maybe 3, 4 years, I've told you this story 100 times, but I'm going to tell everyone. Maybe 3, 4 years, I'm booked in the Menin Arena to wrestle my hero, Tito Santana. I was so nervous. I arrived to the building. There you are, and you come up to me and you say, "Tonight, you're calling the match." The only way you're going to learn is to call the match. And you did that for me when I was just a young kid. And it was just an honor. It's an honor to talk to you today, Tito.
Thank you. Same here, Mike.
Awesome. Uh, I want to talk to you. Just let's hit some highlights. Let's just have fun talking wrestling. I don't know much about Ivan Putski. I've watched you guys team up quite a bit. What can you? Did they bring you into the territory to team with him, or did it just work out? You guys became a tag team.
No, I was brought in uh, just because Andre the Giant brought a tape from Amarillo territory. Uh, I guess Vince Senior uh, wanted to give me a push and bring me up a bit on the card and team me up with Ivan Putski. Ivan Putski was over like $1 million, so it elevated me. Immediately. I became a world tag team champion and became known all over the world because I teamed up with Ivan Putski in the WWF.
How was he inside the ring as a partner? How was he in the locker room?
Uh, as far as I was concerned, with me, uh, from what I understand, he told me that he went up to Vince and told Vince that he wanted to team up with me. I never verified that with Vince, but that's what he told me. Him and I got along. I know that he had a lot of heat with the other wrestlers for being selfish. I think a lot of it was jealousy. Ivan lived in Texas. He would only come and work 3 or 4 days. Vince would pay for his hotel, for his rent a car, and he actually had it pretty good.
When they bring you in, do they tell you? I mean, things were planned out far in advance back then. Do they say you're going to start on this day, you're going to finish on that day, you're going to drop the belts here, or do they see what happens?
No, yeah, yeah. Back then, they would tell you. They, they told me I was going to get the belts with Ivan Putski. They didn't tell me when I was going to drop the belts.
Hmm.
Uh, but when I did find out I was going to drop the belts, I was in the business maybe 2.5 years when I teamed up with Ivan. So I was still wet behind the ears. I was still learning, quite a bit. So when we dropped the belts, the Wild Samoans came in and he said, Vince said, "You're going to drop the belts. You can stay here, but I'm going to have to start beating you, or you can go to other territories and get some experience and then come back when you're ready." So I said, "I'll do whatever you want me to do." So Vince Senior became actually my booker from there on.
Talking about tag team wrestling, talk to me about Rick Martel. I met Rick Martel so many times. What a pleasure to be around. What a nice guy. And I had Bill Eadie and I had Barry Darso on the show earlier in the month, and they couldn't say enough nice things about working with you and Rick.
Well, Rick Martel was, to me, one of the best baby faces in our business, and he turned out to be one hell of a heel also when he became the model. Him and I got along, really, really, really good. It was a pleasure having the, tag team matches with him night in and night out because it was, we each carry our load, and we pretty much guaranteed to have a good match no matter who we went up against. I don't understand why he's not in the Hall of Fame as good as he is. So I'm not in with the office in the WWF, so something's going on, and he's not in the Hall of Fame.
They teamed you up because Tom Zink left. They were transitioning you to be more of a commentator at the time, correct?
No. At the time, commentating was nothing. Was not even mentioned. At the time, you're right. Tom Zink left, and Vince uh, talked to me, and he says, "We'd like to team you up with Rick Martel, and we want to call you the Border Patrol." And at the time, there was a lot of bad stuff happening to Hispanics trying to cross the border in Texas, and some of them died in the train boxes. And I told Vince, I said, if you call us the Border Patrol, you might turn us heel, because of what's going on in the border, in the borders. And he agreed, and then he changed us from Border Patrol to Strike Force, which I think turned out to be a better choice.
Talk to me about why did Strike Force? I remember you came back at WrestleMania 5 with Rick, and he turned on you. But before then, you guys were teaming. You dropped the belts, and then Strike Force was just done. Rick disappeared. Why did you guys break up on TV after you dropped the belt?
We showed up in one of the big shows, one of the big pay-per-views. I think we used to do 4 pay-per-views at the time. We were in California on one of the big pay-per-views, and Rick shows up and he says that he's going to have to take some time off because his wife was ill. So there's nothing, I could say or do. And Vince says, "Okay, we'll drop the belts," and that's what happened. We dropped the belts to Demolition, and Rick was gone for almost a year.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Rick is coming back, and we're still Strike Force, and we go to WrestleMania 5, and we drop the belts to Tully and Arn, and that's when he turns on me. And unbeknown to me, it was obvious afterwards that all along the plan was for him to turn on me and become the model. All of a sudden, Rick Martel was doing a great job with the gimmick, and it was all done behind my back, and I didn't figure it out till it was afterwards, and but there was nothing I could do. Whatever the office wanted, there was not much anybody could do.
Talk about some of the teams you worked with back in the day, because WWF and WWF was such a tag team territory at one time. What a great hotbed for tag team wrestling. And what can I mention a team and you can give me the first thing that pops into your head?
Sure.
How about Demolition?
Well, Demolition was, got over big time with the as a heel and a baby face. People loved them because they became winners, and they were brutal. I mean, they were brutal in the ring too. They pound the hell out of you.
Alpha and Sika.
Well, as Strike Force, we didn't wrestle against them.
Right.
I wrestled against them. They were brutal looking, but their work was. They never hurt anybody. It looked like they were destroying their opponents, but they were such good workers.
What about the Islanders? They were a team that I really liked watching, and I think they're a very underrated team.
We had fantastic matches with the Islanders. They were so good that we had an extended feud with them as Strike Force versus the Islanders. We even had hour time limits, and
Really?
we were able to keep the crowd excited and into the match.
Yeah, I always loved them together. What about the Hart Foundation?
The Hart Foundation, without a doubt, was they were we had similar styles. They were good wrestlers. They had Neidhart, God bless his soul. As he was a powerful guy, but Brett was a very good wrestler, and we used to have good matches.
Were you surprised by the success Brett had?
No, I wasn't surprised. There was a time when they were going to put the belt on me. They were going to go. The WWF was going to go into Mexico, South America, Central America, Spain, and I beat the Undertaker in Spain. And they were building me up. When when I came back as El Matador, and all of a sudden they dropped South America, Central America, Mexico, and they went into Canada, and they chose Brett. I tell people, at that time, there were so many good workers. I don't care who you put the belt on. Everyone, whoever they chose, would have been a good choice. Vince McMahon was a pro at getting guys over, and it took Brett a while to get over, and that's when I came in as a commentator, and the houses were dropped for a long time, and when I come back as a commentator, the houses were up, and Brett was on fire. The whole Canadian thing was on fire. It was like the Canadians against the Americans, and then all of a sudden I hear that Brett's going to be leaving, and I just said to myself, it took all this time to get him over, and now they're going to take the belt away from him. I just couldn't understand, because I felt that he could have carried the belt for quite a while, and do good business.
Hugh, you were definitely there for, all the different genres of the WWF. What was the biggest difference between working for Vince Sr. and Vince Jr.?
Well, Vince Sr., was known for being a man of his word, and he didn't make me any promises, so I didn't have to deal with that as far as a man of his word. But I hear all the other boys, if Vince tells you something, he's going to do it. Vince could change his mind overnight, and there's nothing you could do. There was no talking or changing his mind. I think Vince Jr. was more of a brutal businessman than Vince Sr., but I didn't have that much experience with Vince Sr., so it's hard for me to compare.
When you were a young guy, like whenever you were in the locker room, I'd go to you and I'd ask for advice, or whenever a veteran was there, who were some of the guys that helped you out in the ring as far as the wrestling business, and out of the ring in the wrestling business as far as what to do, what not to do? Like, who were your mentors?
Well, early on, I had believe it or not, Tony Atlas in 1977, my first year when I had just gotten started. Tony was on top in Atlanta. I mean, Tony went all the way to the top very early in his career, and Tony would give me advice. As far as his wrestling advice, I wouldn't really listen too much to Tony, because Tony was a powerhouse. His style of wrestling was he was a powerful man, in the ring. I had to wrestle. So, I listened to his psychology, which was pretty good. From there, I went to the Midwest in Charlotte, and Paul Jones took me under his wing, and he helped me out quite a bit. But back then, I was learning, and I just humbled myself and showed the guys that I was a hard worker, and I wasn't a smart ass. And, after a while, people, I guess started to like me and to see, my work ethic, and they would help you. It was usually the heels that would help you more than the baby faces, because the baby faces, I knew I was going to be competing against and it took me a while to figure out the difference. I was a baby face trying to compete for a baby face spot. I wasn't competing against the heels. But pretty much every time I stepped into the ring, I was stepping into the ring with somebody who was a better worker than me. So I was all ears, and I would ask and try to figure out my mistakes. And the guys that I worked against helped me out pretty much every night.
Talk to me about working with Don Morocco. He's a guy that I would study and watch. He just made wrestling look so just smooth and easy when he'd work. He was just an unbelievable worker from me watching him. What was he like in the ring?
He was a powerhouse, and he was a great heel. Don Morocco could work with guys like me who wrestled, and he could work with guys who weighed 300 pounds. He had a great psychology. He had great control of the match, and his interviews were, fantastic. It was tough working against Don Morocco because he had like a cult following that even though he was a heel at the time, everywhere we wrestled, there was a group of Don Morocco fans that I had to break through every night, and get them, win them over to my side. But you worked with Don Morocco, you knew you were going to have a good match.
Yeah, phenomenal. Yeah, he definitely was a cool heel before cool heels were even a thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Talk to you about Greg Valentine. I'll be honest, Tito, you versus Greg. I mean, not only do the matches still hold up today, but that's my favorite feud of all time.
Well, it was the longest feud in the history, and now with the pay-per-views, it'll probably be the longest feud in the history of the WWE, WWF for forever. We wrestled each other, and we had all kinds of return matches, all types of matches. Finally, I beat him. I won the belt back from him in the cage match in Baltimore. But as far as hard work, I mean, it's hard to find somebody else who worked as hard as Greg did, day in and day out. He was like a pit bull. I mean, he would just keep coming. You'd knock him down, he'd get up. If you wouldn't fight back, he'd eat you up. But him and I had great chemistry. We both knew when to give and when to take, and we were there to get the match over. Not we weren't thinking about ourselves. We were thinking about business and what we were going to do to have a return match, because we started selling out big arenas without Hulk Hogan being on the card, probably more than anybody else, and we'd have return matches, and the people bought into our feud that the return matches would sell out 2, 3, 4 times, and we were building towns. I remember Detroit. The first time we had like 100,000, then it went up to like 175, and that's how you would gauge the houses. It was monetary wise, not how many people were there, is the money. And eventually, the last 2 matches that we had in Detroit, we went from being less than half full to selling out the last 2 matches in a row without anybody else. Of course, we had a great card underneath. It wasn't just us, but we were a big reason why we were selling out.
Now, did you hurt your knee while you were IC champ your first run? Correct? That was a legit injury.
No. Yes, you're right. I hurt my knee, and the guy that tore my knee was Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. We were wrestling in Erie, Pennsylvania, and he tore my cartilage. And I went from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We flew from Pittsburgh to Toronto, and then we drove to Brentford, Ontario, where we were doing our TV taping. We used to tape in Brentford, Ontario, and I told, I walked in with crutches, and I told Vince, I said, it's not good. I'm going to have surgery. I said, but I'd like to do an angle. I think I could manage to, tape my knee up and walk into the ring. And I thought I was going to do an angle with Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. But George Scott loved Greg the Hammer Valentine. And I don't think they really trusted Mr. Wonderful, because Mr. Wonderful would lose his temper and he would tell people off. And they said, you're going to do it with Greg. And, they told me what they wanted. And, I managed to get into the ring, and Greg attacked me and put the figure 4 leg lock, and people really bought it. I had my surgery. They taped the surgery, and I did an interview immediately after the surgery was over, and people bought into it.
How long were you out for?
Believe it or not, I was out for 10 days. I came back, and I had we were on the semi-main event in Madison Square Garden after 10 days. And at the time, I really couldn't do anything. but we had done some pretty serious, believable interviews that I knew I couldn't do much in the ring. So my suggestion was I stepped through the ropes and I just went after Greg, and we fought on the mat, and Greg finally just left and got counted out. And then we came back on I think on a lumberjack match. Our endings would dictate, what kind of a gimmick match we were going to have afterwards. But when I attacked Greg in Madison Square Garden, people really, jumped, got with it. They loved the intensity of the match.
Speaking of the Intercontinental title, that old green belt, I'm sure you have it there in a safe somewhere. The one that Valentine destroyed is worth probably $500,000 by now. Bring it out and show everybody that belt, would you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Where's that belt right now, Tito?
It's in some dumpster, some dump. I had that belt because I have a gym in my house, and I had that belt in the gym for about 10 years, and it was all beat up because Greg destroyed it up against the cage, and I brought it because I was the champion, so I kept it. And I had it on the floor on my gym, and I would look at it every time I'd work out, and I said, "Man, that's nothing but junk." So I finally threw it away, and I could, if I could, I'd kick myself in the butt. You're right. You're right. It would be worth a lot of money.
You didn't know there was going to be an eBay back, 30 years ago.
Who knew how big wrestling was going to get? None of us knew the value of old signatures and old memorabilia, and I mean, the fans. You have something, anything that's ring worn. I mean, they pay big money for that.
At 80s Con this year, Jesse Ventura was there, and I was there when you and he were talking, and he told everybody that you were his favorite wrestler to wrestle. What can you tell me about wrestling Jesse Ventura?
Well, Jesse was a great heel, and if you let Jesse do what Jesse did, we'd go into and he talked about it that night. We'd get in the ring, and we would barely touch each other for 10 minutes, and the people were ready to come in the ring and beat Jesse up. He used to get so natural heat with the fans without doing anything in the ring, and I just followed his steps, and it was a night off. And that's what he said. It was a night off every time we worked.
How do you get along with Jesse personally?
Very good. I met Jesse in the early 80s when he was in Minnesota. And first time I came into Minnesota, he always treated me good. And, I always respected everybody and, expected the same thing in return. And, that's the way it worked. I can't say that I ever had any fallouts with anybody in wrestling.
He always seemed to try and get you over on commentary too. I mean, people, when you're a kid, you're listening to him call you Chico, but he's just really putting you over when he's talking the way he was about you.
Yes, he was over so big as a heel, but whenever he put me down, he would get heat and it would get me over more.
Did you like working with the Macho Man?
Yeah, the Macho Man came in and he learned a lot quickly when he came in. He would come in and he'd have 3 pages of notes of how he wanted the match to go. And, I was used to, the old veterans, we'd go in there and Mr. Fuji taught me this: listen to the people; they tell you what they want. So we would go, and the fans would dictate, how the matches would go. Believe it or not.
So he would literally hand you a script?
Yeah, he'd go over with what he wanted to do, and who's going to remember 3 pages of notes, and he would forget, and then he would have a hard time getting it back on track. And I believe that maybe he doesn't think this, but or he didn't think this, but I believe that I helped him. Back then we all helped each other, and I believe I helped him become a better worker. He turned out to be one of the best workers in the best careers in the history of the WWF and WWE.
Were you surprised that they chose him to be the world champion?
No, I wasn't surprised. Him and Elizabeth got over like $1 million, and it was all about dollars and dollars for Vince, and he went for it. Not everybody that Vince chose, got over like $1 million, like and drew money. They tried to push some guys that just never drew money and never got over. He got over and he drew money.
Did it ever bother you personally? Did you ever I don't know, I don't want to say disgruntled, but did it ever bother you that you'd go to work, you were always in shape, you were always, everything you did was great. You're very reliable, all the good stuff about you. Did it ever piss you off that they'd bring someone in and they put them on higher up on the card than you? Did that bother you?
No, I had a job. I talked to Vince, because I was upset, and I would tell Vince, I don't think you're using me to the best of, I think I got so much to offer, and I don't think you're taking advantage of it. And he would say, Tito, he showed me a scale from the bottom. He says, you never, and then he walked up to the middle of the scale. He says, you're always from the middle to the top. You're in the middle for a while, because you're such a good worker that you can get guys over, and then I give you a little push, and you get over. I bring you to the top and keep you in the top for a while, and then you come down to the middle. You never go below the middle, and it made sense. And I was in the WWF longer than anybody else when I left. Me and Hulk Hogan were the only wrestlers who were on WrestleManias 1 through 9, and I got to the WWF before Hulk Hogan. So I was in the WWF longer than anybody else at the time that I left. So, I mean, it was a good career. Could I have made more money? Yes. Could I have had better positions? Yes. But it wasn't my choice.
Hard to argue with that answer, right? That's a perfect, I bet you Vince has a lot of perfect answers that's hard to argue with, right?
Yes, he does.
Last question. If you can go back in your prime and work with one more guy that you've already worked with one more time, and work with someone from any era you've never worked with before, who would those two guys be?
Well, I tell you, I wish I would have had a feud with the hot rod Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper was a fantastic draw, and he was a genius in the ring, and a genius with his interviews. It would have been nice. You learn the business working with top guys, but I mean, Jake the Snake, Mr. Wonderful, you could just go down the line. These guys were just, one as good as the other. You couldn't say, I hear wrestlers, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Well, that's just a gimmick. And Brett knows that. Everybody was good back then. You can't say, wrestling was not real. Wrestling, we were entertainers. We were only as good as Vince McMahon decided we were going to be. Everybody was a good worker.
Anybody like from now you'd want to work with? Anyone from today?
Well, I don't watch the product now, so I couldn't tell you who's there. I know that Bob Orton's son is there, and I've seen him a couple of times, and he's pretty good. But I believe that back then, anybody who had a father that was a wrestler, for some reason, they were automatic good workers. You can just go down the line. The Rock, the Samoans. And you can just go on and on and on, for some reason. The Funks, Jake, Sam Houston was a pretty good worker for he was. He never got the push that Jake got, but he was also a great worker. All the Hart Foundation families, they were all fantastic workers.
Awesome. Thank you, Tito. Is there anything you wanna plug? Is there anything if promoters want to get in touch with you? Is there anything you want to talk about?
Well, if anybody who can, who wants to get, I'm on Facebook as Merced Solis. Uh, Anybody who wants to reach out and do something with me, you can also use other promoters that you know of to reach out to me. Uh, People manage to find me. I don't I don't make any phone calls. If somebody wants to use me, I still do appearances. I don't do any wrestling because I have a torn meniscus on my knee, so I can't wrestle anymore. But I do want to tell the fans, I want to thank the fans for all these years of support because they continue to support me. No matter where I show up, they're always Tito Santana fans, and I'm forever grateful. Arriba!
Well, I'm one of them, Tito. You know that. Thank you so much for today. This was awesome.
Thank you, Mike. Take care.
Thanks, Tito.
Bye.